Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today we're going to be talking about first aid, probably one of the most underused, thankfully, and most needed areas of emergency preparedness. A lot of people don't like prepping for the medical aspect of things because it's not as cool as stockpiling firearms and freeze-dried food, but it is absolutely vital that you have a good emergency kit and you know what the contents are of that kit. You are very familiar with what's in that kit and you know how to use the items within it. Now, I'm by no means a medical expert. My wife is currently in training to be a nurse. I have your basic first aid training and certification, but beyond that, my knowledge is quite limited. There are numerous YouTube channels who I'm going to post links to who have provided me with some ideas and contents for this first aid roll that you see here that I will link in the description. Now, the system that I use for my first aid equipment is the bug out roll. The administration of first aid is probably one of the most practical uses for this bug out roll platform. However, it hasn't really gotten a lot of attention for that yet, although I think that this would be a great tool for emergency responders, for prepper groups, or just for prepper families. And because it's so versatile in the sense that you can, like we have ours hanging up in the house. So in spite of the roll-up factor and the portability, this platform is not limited to use in a bug-out scenario. It's as functional to use it in a non-bug-out scenario, in a bug-in scenario, or just for everyday use around the house as it is in a vehicle or a bug-out bag, a long-term off-grid bag, or even to stay permanently at a bug-out location. We currently have ours hanging up in the house, and in a pinch, I can roll it up and I can transport it wherever I need to transport it. Now, currently, before I get into all of the contents of this kit, I want to say we're going to be doing a $30 off deal on this bug-out roll. It currently retails for about $199.99 on CanadianPreparedness.com. I'm gonna slash that down to $169.99 for the next 10 days after this video, and you're also going to get a couple CPR first aid shields that I'm gonna throw in there that you can put throughout the pack wherever you want. As we'll discuss, there's lots of hook and loop places that you can attach little accessories like that. So I would encourage you to capitalize on that offer while it's there. And just to go over this again, no other first aid roll system uses the tough 30 gauge cold crack UV resistant vinyl that we do. The 1000 denier Cordura fabric, which is basically indestructible. This thing has been built to mill specifications. Even though it's not technically mill spec, this is better than a lot of the stuff that the military would build. So you can see we got really high speed number 10 YKK zippers, so you're never going to have a problem opening this up in the case of an emergency. We have double stitching everywhere. A lot of the first aid rolls that you see, or first aid bags, because this is really the only first aid roll of its kind. There's some other ones, but they're much smaller. Some of them use mesh, they use really cheap vinyl, and they have really crappy stitching. This one, we actually sew some seam tape there, and we actually double stitch that. A lot of places, what they'll do is they'll just stitch right over the vinyl, and that's going to be prone to tearing out. This, you have double reinforcement, you have double stitching along all of the vinyl parts where the vinyl is attached to the Cordura, and that's very vital. You have very big zippers, zipper pulls. If you wanted, you could add a variety of things like I'm going to show to each one of those zipper pulls. You have a fast access administration panel where you could put things like, you know, tourniquets, first aid spray, things like that, things you want to need instantly, like an EpiPen. And we also have one open section here, and this is for things, once again, that you need in a pinch that you don't want to have to go through a zipper to get to. Now, this thing can deploy in about 5 seconds, and once deployed, the benefit of this is that you have all these optical windows so you can see absolutely everything. So it's not, you don't even really, lots of people say, well, can you put patches on here so that you can label, you know, where the stuff is? But that defeats the purpose in my mind. The whole point of this is to have full visual clarity, so you don't have to label each section. Now, if you want, you can get a Dymo labeler, and you could just get a label sticker and stick that on the vinyl. That would work just fine if you feel that you need to do that. But once again, that kind of defeats the purpose. The great thing with a kit like this is if you do have a novice first aider helping administrate the first aid on somebody, and you have somebody who is more experienced and more familiar with this bag, they can have quick visual access to those things, and their assistance to that person or yourself would be far more precise and accurate. And just so you know, these pockets are 18 inches long or 9 inches long for the medium pockets and 7 inches deep. So you can fit some fairly big items within it. You're not going to fit an oxygen tank in there, but most first aid items, like 90%, will fit within the roll system. Now, I had a subscriber mention this product to me, and I had never heard of it before, which is funny because you think you would have, because it's a simple concept. It's basically just taking those hand warmers and putting it into a blanket format. So this is the Ready Heat blanket. It's an emergency blanket, and it's a blanket which is going to, just like those hand warmers, you open them up, you expose them to air. I believe it's comprised of iron powder, some activated carbon, and a few other things. And that's going to interact to generate heat for about 8 hours. So I think something like this in a first aid kit would be highly beneficial, especially if you live in a winter environment where maybe you needed to do some work on somebody outside and it was very cold out, and a Mylar blanket or a reflective heat blanket is not going to suffice in generating the amount of heat that you need at that point in time. Now, this one, you probably wouldn't be able to fit it into the roll. I mean, you could, but you don't want to put too much pressure on this bag either, because it is vacuum sealed, and you don't want to create any punctures, because once these things are exposed to air, they instantly start to lose their effectiveness. But I was able to fit a smaller one in there, which could be used for toddlers, infants, smaller people, or it could be used for a larger person as well, just to provide them with some heat to one region of their body if it was needed. So I thought that was a really cool item, and I'll post a link to that among other things in here in the description. So I'm not going to go into great depth about everything you see here. I'm just going to quickly go through what I have in here, and this is something which could likely be organized a lot better. I may actually pay somebody, like an emergency responder, one of the emergency responder friends that I do have, to organize this in a way which is most effective. And one thing I should add about the roll is that I see a lot of first aid bags, the way they're set up is they don't have this optical transparency. So you know, it's really expected that the person using those bags is going to know where everything is, and there can be a lot of fumbling through stuff if you don't know where things are. A lot of times those people are trained to know exactly where what they need is at the time, but you know, in the case where, like I said, you had somebody who was assisting you working on somebody, or you were dealing with a mass casualty situation, then it's nice to have everything visual and identifiable. But enough about that. So the bottom here, I just have some sterile pads, some very large sterile gauze pads. I have some icy hot, so just in case there was some kind of ache, pain relief for aches and strains. There's some medical tape in there. There's an eye pad in case you sustain some kind of eye injury. There is some, I don't know what they're called, what's the official name, maxi pads, basically women's hygiene products. There's just some more tensor bandage, sterile, not really sterile pads, wrapped up in saran wrap. I know it's not entirely sterile, but the thing is, you know, in the case of emergency, I mean, if you got nothing else and what you're looking at is for the most part clean, you know, compared to what they had to use like in the Civil War, where it was just a bunch of dirty, grimy, bloody instruments. Something like this is gold, you know. So even though it's not sterile, it's still clean, you know. So I mean, if I would use that as a last ditch, but something to consider anyways. I also have some of these compressed towels. These are the Wysiwipes disposable cloths. So they're not like the toilet paper tablets, which are really small. They're a bit bigger. These are the, I think I call them the toilet paper discs. So they're going to expand, create a large cloth that you can use for a variety of things. And something like this could be very useful, especially if, you know, lots of times in an accident, people's bowels release. And, you know, you're going to have to clean that up with something. So having something to clean that up with would be useful. And we're considering here, if this is an off-grid or grid-down situation, then all you're going to have are the contents of this kit. Just some Q-tips here, which can be handy for the application of various ointments or cleaning certain regions. A triangular bandage. Now, this is my medical section. There's a few things I don't have in here, like Imodium and a couple other things. But just to give you some ideas of what you might want to put in yours. So this is called Facemasks. It's amoxicillin. It's pretty much exactly the same as the amoxicillin that you would get from the doctor. Now, I got to post a disclaimer saying I can't officially say that with 100% certainty, but based on all of the research I've done, there's a high probability that this is very, very similar, if not exactly the same as the stuff which you get prescribed. For a variety of reasons. If you go, I've done whole videos on this particular topic. So this is something obviously you'd only use if the grid was down and there was no other solution. You needed to get somebody on an antibiotic quickly, then that would be a solution for that. This is just to give you another idea on how you can store your medicines. So I have Mylar bags here that I've heat sealed, and it's very hard for air to escape Mylar. That's why they use it for food preservation. It's much easier for things like plastic, which become more porous over time, to lose, you know, their air or bring in oxygen, and thus damaging the products or degrading the products inside. So this is an option if you want to store medication perhaps a little bit longer. Once again, as a disclaimer, I can't make any guarantees with that, and I'm not a medical expert, so you shouldn't necessarily take my advice, but this is just something for you to do more research on. Also just have some sore throat lozenges, which I've been using lately because I've been sick. Just some chewing gum, maybe more of a morale boosting thing. Have some oral wound cleanser, because getting an infection in your mouth in a SHTF situation would suck a lot. So I have a few of those. There's no sense just having one, because it's something that if you do have a serious mouth injury, you're going to be using often. Just some Neocitrin cold and flu, some hydrocortisone cream, some Afterbite for bites. And that's important too, because if you do get some kind of bug bite, you may just think, well, it's a minor irritation, but if you keep scratching it or picking at it, or you have a child who keeps scratching and picking at it, that can grow to become infected. Some lip medics, basically lip chap, very, very essential item out in the back country. Some eucalyptus oil for opening up the sinuses. Some Oragel, so it's like a benzocaine, it's a topical anesthetic. Some Advil, and of course some Tylenol. I probably should put some aspirin in there as well for anybody who might have heart problems. And you may also want to put some kind of sugar in there, and of course all of your own personal medications which you are prescribed, which hopefully you have a surplus of, because as we all know, if the grid ever did go down for a prolonged period of time, you're not going to be seeing those medications being manufactured for some time. So it's good to have a sufficient store of your medication. And if you do ever get injured and you are offered medication, maybe you don't want to take that medication right now. And once again, I'm not giving you any sort of, I don't want to tell you what you should do, and I don't want to give you any advice which is illegal, but just consider that if your doctor offers you something, especially something which would be very useful and hard to get in a crap hits the fan situation, something like an opiate per se, which is basically the only real deal painkiller which is going to work for alleviating global pain in your body, you might want to consider taking them up on that offer. What you do with that medication is up to you, but bear in mind, of course, it is highly addictive, so you want to, exercise some caution when using that stuff. Here, I won't take these items out. This is kind of more emergency kit related section, so there is some hydration aspects here. So we do have some mouth care, so I have some more Listerine, which is also alcohol, I should add. When push came to shove, if nothing else, you could have a person actually drink that, and that might provide them some temporary relief. Now, once again, I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm just giving you ideas. Listerine has a very high alcohol content. There's lots of people who drink that stuff to get drunk, and I definitely would not recommend doing that. But it's there as an option, and of course, it's good as a mouthwash. In case you did ingest something, some kind of parasite or something like that, or you're worried about intaking some kind of contagion, then maybe you could flush it out before it actually entered your system with that. I also have some water purification droplets. I have an air horn, which is going to create a very loud horn, so that's going to signal for help. What else do we have in here? We have a signal mirror and an emergency blanket within there. So there's a lot of other things I could probably still throw in there. And on here, I have a CPR face shield first aid key. I have a few of these throughout the kit because it's good to have this accessible in a variety of different places. Now, unless it's a family member, and maybe even if it is a family member, in the case of a pandemic or something like that, if you have to perform CPR on somebody, you don't want to be getting right in there and actually, doing the mouth-to-mouth stuff, making close contact. So, it's something to consider, is that you should have some way to keep some sort of barrier between you and that person. It's been a while since I've done my first aid training, but I think currently, and don't quote me on this, they're advising you don't even need to do mouth-to-mouth anymore, that they're just doing the compressions. But like I say, don't quote me on that. I'm not sure what the convention is about that, and I'm not sure if that's from country to country or if that's international or what the case. So it might be different in the United States. Now on this zipper pull here, I have a flashlight which can quickly disconnect by these night ties clips, which also lock on there. Flashlight is probably one of the most overlooked aspect of most first aid kits, because think about it, the dark is half of the 24-hour cycle. So chances are, if an emergency happens, it very well could happen at night. I also have a headlamp, and the light that I put in this first aid kit is the H2R Nova because it's highly versatile. It can be used as a headlamp, but it can also stand up on its own, and it has an L-shaped configuration, so you can point it in whichever direction. You can angle it like that. There's a variety of different ways you can angle it. Also has a magnetized end, so it can stick to a car if you're at the scene of an accident or something like that, which, it's probably unlikely that you're going to be doing that. It's probably more likely going to be a first responder, but very versatile flashlight for a first aid kit, in my opinion. All right, so here we have some fiberfix. So once again, disclaimer, I'm not a medical expert, but this is very strong stuff, and when it dries, it gets very hard, like a cast. And so you could actually make a pretty good cast out of this if you had somebody who had broken an arm or had a fracture of some sort somewhere. This could help stabilize that region. definitely pretty cool stuff. Much stronger than casting material, maybe even too strong, but you could still cut it off with shears. Just some more gauze, rolled gauze. This is kind of the fracture section, so we have a finger splint, we have that ready heat heating blanket, and we also have a full-size SAM splint within there for the major fractures and breaks. Like I say, you can fit a lot of stuff in here. I have not even really maxed it out yet, but we have some serious trauma related stuff, and this is stuff that I hope I never ever have to use, because not only am I very ill experienced in ever having to use it, but it would mean that it's very serious. So here, this is kind of for gunshot wounds. So this is a hyphen vent chest seal twin pack wound kit. We have some heavy duty compressed gauze. So here we have some Celox granules with an applicator, and what this is going to do, it's going to work very similar to something like your quick clot, where it's going to, in a very targeted area because of the applicator, which is just like an injection syringe type thing, it's going to allow you to clot blood in a certain region. So this would be something for gunshots. So we have an abdominal pad. This is something from Dr. Bones Nurse Amy, which is just a diagram. This would be something for trained emergency responders to use to just record any, like, their analysis, their assessment, whatever you want to call it, of a person. I also have my Write in the Rain waterproof notepad in there, so it could be handy. A few more irrigation syringes, and so that's where you're gonna go if somebody gets shot. And it's good to have these shears somewhere quick, I presume. I mean, I've never been a first responder, so this is all hypothetical for me, but I presume that you'd want these kind of near the top or in a very accessible place, because that's probably what you're going to have to do first, is cut the person's clothing off for some situations. Like I say, check out those links that I'm going to post in the description if you want more expert advice on this sort of thing. Now over here we have some more shelter options. So we do have this, I believe it's made by Soul. Yeah, it's a 1 to 2 person survival blanket in a nice little fancy package. Another survival blanket, and we also have a survival poncho. Now I've considered putting a ultralight sil nylon tarp in here as well, because were it raining and you had to do some work on somebody, that could be something which could be very problematic as well. So having a lightweight sil nylon tarp might be another option for here, which would create more versatility as well for survival applications. So in this section here, we have a larger sterile irrigation syringe. We have a needle decompression kit. So if somebody was having a hard time breathing due to a collapsed lung, you pop them with this thing, and that is going to open their airways up. This is a EpiPen. So obviously if a person has an allergic reaction, something my wife might want to get in here is a naloxone kit, which is an opiate overdose kit, because that's becoming a very common occurrence nowadays with the fentanyl addiction. I'm not sure if you guys have that problem in the United States. Just have a digital thermometer in there. Probably replace that with an analog one, and a red Sharpie marker. Here I have some Lanacane first aid spray, another very large irrigation syringe to clean out those dirty regions. Just a, I'm not sure what this is called, tensor bandage, I believe. So, you know, apply some tension to a region. So not really something that needs to be perhaps in the forefront like that, but I just wanted to fill that spot with something. Here in the quick access section, we do have a tourniquet. I'm not sure what kind it is. It's a tactical tourniquet, so it's a good one. It's a good tourniquet. I'm not sure if it meets Skinny Medic's approval, but who knows? Skinny Medic's another great YouTube channel. Go check it out for medical advice of this sort. Here I have a CPR kit, and this one is a step up from the CPR face shield here, because this is going to create even more of a barrier between you and that individual. There's also a pair of gloves in there. It takes up a lot of space, but you know, it's worth it if you can save a life. Here we have some ammonia inhalants, so if somebody has fainted and you need to get them conscious right away. We also have some blister medic, which this doesn't need to be in here as well. It doesn't need to be in the fast access section, so I'll probably remove that at some point. But basically that is for, this stuff right here is for whatchamacallit, blisters, things like that, which is something that's probably going to happen because a lot of people haven't broken their bug out boots yet. Once again, another face shield there, just good to have them throughout the kit. Have an Israeli bandage, have some quick clot for those major situations where you have to stop bleeding. I've heard it said that unless you really have to use this stuff, don't use it, because if the person ever does receive trained professional medical treatment, they have to get all of this crap out of the wound. So, you know, if there's any other way that you can stop the bleeding, which you feel is going to be effective in doing so, then choose that over this. But this is something which will stop the bleeding and which will cause that blood to clot up really quickly. Just have some more tensor bandages there. So this is kind of my pandemic contagion section. So I have some Hiba cleanse. So that's something you would put on your hands, and that's going to allow you to work in an environment which is perhaps contaminated, and it's anything that comes into your hands for several hours after using this is going to be inactivated or killed. So this, it's not just like hand sanitizer where you're killing what's already on your hands. It's actually going to continue to work for many hours after you've applied it to your hands. So it's Hiba cleanse. Interesting stuff. Here we have just some biohazard stickers, because remember, if you are in a situation where you're dealing with disease, then especially contagious disease, you know, having a way to alert people that there's contaminants around is important. Have some heavy duty biological waste bags with the biohazard symbol on them. Some gloves. Also have some of these, which are Curad Antiviral face masks. So this is the only FDA approved mask to actually kill the flu virus when it comes into contact with this mask. So all other N99 masks, they stop the virus from coming through, but they don't actually kill the virus. So this is something for your consideration as well. I've done extensive videos on that product also. Here, once again, we just have more surgical gloves. More gloves. You can never have enough gloves. You can never have enough anything, really, when it comes to first aid. Especially gauze and bandage, because that stuff is going to go really fast. Because oftentimes the band-aid's going to come off, or, you know, you're going to have to keep changing the wound. So keep that in mind when you do think you have gauze. For me, gauze is like firewood. You know, when you think you have enough, double it, and then triple that amount, and then that might get you through the night or through the winter or whatever sort of stretch of time you're thinking about. So this is a very cool thing. This is a skin stapler, and the Mountain RN had made a video about this. I actually had this before he did his video, but I never actually had used it or seen it being used. I just figured, hey, that's cool. My all-American prepper within me decided that I should make that purchase, even though I didn't know how to use it or what it did, really, other than that it closed wounds. But he demonstrates it with a video of him in the Urban Prepper, and it's quite painless. It's much easier to apply than a suture, which I do have, which I'm not trained to apply, which, you know, would scare the crap out of me if I ever actually had to use it. I guess the hope would be with some of this stuff is that even if you didn't have the experience to use it, that somebody around might, if you weren't in a position where you can get that sort of training. So, you know, it's never really a lost cause to have this stuff in your first aid kit, which is why I don't agree with the Patriot Nurse's assessment that you shouldn't have a surgical kit in your first aid kit, or that you have no right to have a surgical kit inside your first aid kit, because yes, you may not know how to use that, but somebody else might come along who does. And, you know, it's going to be very rare that you're going to meet, you know, a random surgeon in a post-collapse environment, but you never know. It could happen, and they may need tools. You might have them. Skin stapler, a great way to close wounds. I also have some sutures. Like I said, I hope I never have to use these. They're wrapped, they're in their own individual packages, and those packages are within packages, and I've wrapped it with saran wrap just to give it a bit more protection. I do have a scalpel there as well. I do have some lidocaine, which is I believe that's a topical anesthetic as well, or a local anesthetic. So that's about the extent of my pain killing capability. Some tweezers there. Just have a variety of band-aids, more gauze, medical tape, some hydrogen peroxide, and then of course some alcohol swabs and iodine, things of that nature. So that's pretty much the kit. So, you know, you could do whatever you want with this. And yeah, I got, you know, a whistle here. I got a compass on there. This is just basic first aid stuff. You might even want to put some fire starting implements in here, because if you are in an outdoor environment, getting that person warm, if, you know, after you use the emergency blanket, or if it was a situation where you couldn't use that blanket, then having a warm fire could be very useful. So having, you know, a lot of your normal emergency survival gear is going to come handy in a medical emergency situation. Now, for reference material, I would also recommend Dr. Bones' Nurse Amy's book on survival medicine handbook. That's a great one. I'm going to post a link to that in the description. That's a great book when help is not on the way, basically. And that's written by preppers who have grid down in mind. So that would be a great reference book to have around the house, at your bug out location, what have you. I also have this outdoor medical emergency handbook. It's just a very well written, very organized book, which goes into a lot of great detail about what you should do in certain situations. But once again, it's going on the premise that help may sometime come. So if you're looking for something which is assuming that help is never going to come, or not going to be there for a long time, then you're definitely going to want to go with Dr. Bones' Nurse Amy's book. And don't forget, we do have that $30 off special for the next 10 days on the red first aid roll, which is going to bring the price down to $169.99 Canadian, which is basically going to equate to something in the area of maybe 125 to 130 bucks USD. So I think it's very reasonably priced for what you're getting. I mean, we can't afford to do deals like that all the time, which is why it's a very limited one-time thing really for the first aid roll, because normally these retail for around 200 bucks, and it's up to you to customize it yourself. First aid equipment can be very expensive unless you have some kind of connection in the medical field. Then hey, maybe it can be a little bit cheaper. So let me know if you have any comments, questions. I'm going to be on hiatus here for a few days, but I will be returning, and I will try to get back to as many of the comments as I can. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.